Hey there. Okay, and now, of course,
Hi,
I have to
Max.
pull up what I was just looking at. Hi there. You can hear me again, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. If it's coming through, I'll just leave it as it is. It looks like it. Now I'm not so glitchy anymore. And so here we go. Gonna share, clicking share. Is this
Got it.
working?
Yes.
Now you see. Okay, very good. I'll make
Yes.
it full screen. And very sorry for that. A little bit of interruption. And we'll see. This may glitch out and cause all sorts of problems, but we're just going to run with it. I am a storyboard artist in Los Angeles. I do sketches every day for directors and producers in all kinds of entertainment. This is just my little splash screen introduction, but this is a concept piece for, if you've ever seen the Apple series, The Helpsters. It's for children. It's got little Muppets, and this is a sketch to help guide decision making about what might be a live action version of this that could be a drop-in experience in downtown Manhattan, for instance. So I sketched this to make it look like there's some sort of boutique experience that children can bring their children, parents can bring their children to meet the helpsters in person, for instance. And little loose sketches like this help get the ball rolling from someone who says, hey, what if, into actually making it a reality. So this is just one example. I'm going to go through a few case studies. I'm going to be a little rushed in some of this stuff. I know we have limited time. And then I'm going to try and do a demo, which hopefully will impress and or embarrass me. There's my whole reputation at stake. So we'll see how it goes. But let's see. Okay, so getting the little fade in and out. Oh, that's great. Cuts off the top and the bottom. There we go. Okay, so I'm Max Forward. This is a sketch of me. I'm incredibly buff. No, but this is something where, often just sketches like this that sort of convey a mood or whatever is all it takes to get the juices flowing in a production. I've been doing this a long time. I had humble beginnings wherein I was just simply posting literally these sketches on Craigslist and seeing if anybody would be willing to hire me for almost no money. And I was lucky enough to be doing that at a time where no one else was doing it, but people also had demand for it. So I got my foot in that way in doing all sorts of illustrations. And after 20 years of spinning the wheels like that, I am now doing really cool illustrations and concept art to accompany projects that go on the world's biggest screens. And so this is something that, if you recognize it, is in downtown Tokyo. This is like in the Times Square equivalent of downtown Tokyo, where they've got these giant warping illusionistic screens where they've got layers of perspective that give a sense that these characters are literally coming out. And hopefully hopefully I'm coming through still. I can see some things glitching, but anyway, just shout stop if something gets too glitched out and I need to stop. But I'm gonna keep rambling till we're out of time. So what's happening is here we've got the characters for a popular video game series, Apex Legends. It's one of those huge properties, and if you don't know about it, probably your kids do. But anyway, I use all of my artistic skills on a daily basis, understanding perspective and the human form and character design and acting and shading and composition. All that stuff comes to bear every day. And so from a sketch like this, it can turn into something that is actually made. And so this is literally a screenshot from someone who bothered to go out in Tokyo and record the actual finished product, and it turned out pretty great. So that was cool. Cool of me. It's one off the bucket list when you get to get one of those experiences in. And I've even done work that's appeared on the Sphere, for instance, in Las Vegas. And I don't have samples of that. You'll have to take my word for it. All right. But what is a storyboard? Well, a storyboard is, generally speaking, the best analogy is like a little comic book for production, where people can take a look and see very quickly at a glance small images that translate to a story being told in sequential images. And there can be, this is something from a music video, from a Meghan Trainor music video pitch. This was never made, but it helped the director to make his case that, hey, this could be a cool accompaniment for the song. Like, we can tell a story that reinforces the themes of the song using these visuals. And of course, this is obviously one of those super expensive, high concept things. We've got waves of crashing people. Obviously not a cheap kind of production, but if someone had the money and was convinced via these drawings, it could have happened. On to the next one. This was a storyboard for a video game, and you can see that we've got all sorts of different characters lining up, this sort of tension building as transformations are happening. And you can see that from one project to the next, I have to draw in varying different styles, and all sorts of different challenges arise. I remember on this one, I had two different directors telling me they wanted to do completely different things, and I was in the middle, and I had to sort of work with them diplomatically, even though they hated each other, to synthesize their different visions onto the page. Go to the next one. This was a very high concept artistic piece. This was made, and you might have even seen this commercial, where a BMW is basically buzzing by an art museum, and in the art museum, different evolutions of art that are coming to life as installations are echoed in the acceleration of artistic integrity in the BMW universe, or something like that. You can tell I'm good with my jargon. But it was a chance to, among other things, draw interesting architecture, and some of this is real world stuff. Some of it is just conceptual, but it was all interesting and a fun challenge. And again, a different kind of style was needed for this presentation. All right, and this was another fun one where Minecraft, of course, it's a super popular video game IP. Also, sky's the limit on this sort of stuff. So we were able to really stretch our imaginations and come up with something that was cool. But again, it's like all the different entities involved. Microsoft, Mojang, the whatever the developer was, the handlers for the talent, which we didn't know until the last minute that they were going to cast the girl who played Supergirl, for instance, and all the things. So dynamic new information coming in up until the last minute. Storyboards have to be concrete yet malleable, so that we can make changes on a fly if we need to. On to the next one. And I'm going to rush through some of this stuff, but here's just a quick case study of what I kind of do with storyboarding. We've got very popular. This was for the video game before the movie, before the TV shows came out. But The Last of Us 2 was a video game that I was hired to do a trailer for. And of course, it all starts off with a script, which is very generic and often at odds with what the video game developers are trying to do, because video game developers don't like to leak their secrets, even to writers. And then the director is somehow caught in the middle, and then it all has to get distilled down to someone who can actually do the drawings. Of course, that's me. So that little icon represents me. And even before I got on the project, there had been another artist who apparently didn't do a good enough job. So what they did was hire her. They brought me on, and some of the stuff that she did was good, but some of the ideas were not good. You can see they nixed the idea of them stabbing the person over here. You can see that they're like, no stabbing, yes for running. So of course we took this to heart, made a new story. These are rough sketches, just basically what I came up with on my first day. And I was like, okay, well, if they can't stab each other, maybe what they can do is they can get trapped on both sides, and at the last second they jump out of the way through a doorway, and then instead of stabbing someone, the two enemies just simply shoot each other from across the hallway accidentally. Like, could that happen? You're just trying to think of like, well, if they can't escape this way, maybe they can escape another way. And of course, the reason they weren't allowed to stab anybody in the first place was because they wanted to keep the E rating for the game. I don't know how stuff like this ends up not being like rated R for whatever reason, but they were trying to have it be that way. And okay, yeah. So these are just example, like full screen versions of sketches that I did. So you can see the fidelity in these early stages. It's very loose, but of course, it's like I'm drawing energy and just thinking about composition and what is a quick read for the viewer. What's something that someone can easily look at and say, no, that doesn't work, or yes, that does work. Often we have to split our storylines into different kind of concepts. Like, okay, here's one where she does stab someone. Here's one where she just runs away. Here's one where she does something that's somewhere in the middle. And they sort of audit and present they'll cut these into things called animatics, where we can see like the stories and progression on a video. and the tiniest arbitrary changes will be made from one version to the next until they find one that they love. And then that becomes the sequence that gets fully developed. And then, of course, it gets passed on to me to actually render it. And so here you can see that I'm working against the clock. I'm often given far too little time to improve a drawing, but I do my best, and I work efficiently when I can to take a drawing that is rough but good into something that really feels like it's a portfolio sample almost, but also doesn't take very long. And so here's an example of boards that get approved because the artwork looks good and it's the sequence that they're looking for. Look, you can see fun things like shadow of the bad guy chasing her, all sorts of stuff. Oh man, drawing stairwells is really hard, but I think I did a serviceable job here. Think about the storytelling in an image like this, where we've got the character lying in the foreground while bad guys are searching in the background, trying to play this game of cat and mouse out visually, and all these different things. Oh, and of course, there was this big debate of what kind of gun should she have, and of course, they were like, "Well, we don't know." When we keep asking them, and they keep saying, "Well, we'll tell you later." So let's just make it the like a shotgun or something like that. So I made it a shotgun. Well, in the end, they did have the girl stab the guy because the developer insisted on it at the last minute, and they changed the shotgun to a revolver because apparently that was an incredibly important prop, like a prop piece, because she inherited it, I guess, from her protector in the first video game series. Of course, all that makes sense now, but all right, I see some people shaking heads there. All right, yeah. So you can see what I deal with is people withholding crucial information until the last darn second, and then no matter what, we can still satisfy almost nobody in the final product. But actually, the finished trailer did look great, and I was pleased that most of what we put into it went around. But it's so funny because even the people who make the final decisions, they're not even really in charge either. So it's a Sisyphusian task, right? Trying to please the unpleasable. But what was a point of pride for me was after getting this thing actually signed off on, there were probably a team of 100 people that were thus then employed to actually execute the thing. And they pour, it's like a pipeline where then they pour their hearts and souls into it. And it all translates to something amazing in the end. But I'm there at the beginning where something is just a glimmer in someone's eye of possibility. And so that's an exciting thing to be there where I can sort of push something out to sea, but then not actually deal with the risk as it actually, goes on its voyage, right? All right, here's another fun case study. Clash of Clans. All right, maybe some of you play this. Maybe you've heard of it. It's one of those addictive, free to play, cost money to win kind of deals. And they've got these amazing characters and IPs. Well, a few years ago, they were doing a spin-off, making a new version of the same game, essentially Clash of Clans Capitals, and they just needed different iterations on what would be a fun splash screen for the game to be loading. And of course, it's like a war game with different kinds of towns and cities that are on different steps. I see more shaking heads here. Yeah, yeah, we're kind of familiar with some of this stuff. But of course, no one knows what they want until they literally see it in front of their eyes, right? So we kind of have to split our efforts and render out different kind of concepts, just iterating as we go. I've given a few days basically to turn around concepts like these. And I know that even though these aren't technically storyboards, we're not doing sequential storytelling, that most of the compositional and illustrating requirements are the same. So you could see going through it from rough sketch to like this is basically rough line art. Here is a much more complete version where essentially my client took it to their client and said, hey, sign off on one of these so we can actually execute this thing in time. So we could guess which one is best. I think I did my best to make them all look good, but of course the one that they went with was this one, and it does look really good. And so this is me sort of giving it a little bit more full render so that it gets passed off to, again, in the pipeline. All of a sudden, the storyboards are like this bottleneck, right? But then after it passes by me, it gets the sign off. Everybody gets to then get hired on and bring their talents to the thing. So whereas at first it's just producer, director, writer, storyboard artist, then it becomes concept artists and designers and 3D modelers and 3D everythings and eventually compositors, etc. So here's a concept art piece where they're doing color studies of it. And then this was the final thing. So I love it when I can see the hand of my work still in the finished piece, even though I hadn't touched it in months. It's fun to see that sort of thing, and then see the more changes. Look, they introduced all these new interesting things in the background, all sorts of things. It's fun, But this little guy attached by the foot in the rope was my idea in the very beginning, and he's still there. Look how fun that is. Okay, I think this is the last one. We'll rush through it real quick. You guys might have heard of a company called Meta, and a few years ago there was this there was this killer concept that we knew was going to change the world, which was this sort of hybridized play and work experience known as Oculus Horizon. And no one knew what it was supposed to look like, especially people at Meta. They just knew that it had to come out really quickly. And we didn't know at the last until nearly the last minute that, for instance, no one was allowed to have legs, and all this stuff wasn't actually going to be in there. And so this was very difficult for us to actually tease out what they wanted when what they wanted wasn't something they knew. And but again, that's nothing I'm not used to. And they were like, "Hey, we needed this other company to do this, and they haven't been able to do anything. Can you please do something and do it quickly?" And my client was like, "Sure." And they hired me, and I got right to it. So this is the very first sketch that I came up with. There was all this with these notions of like, do we have these floating abstract different things that airplanes can fly through, and that's a game. Basically, we wanted to make it look like several different games and experiences existed simultaneously in the same world. And what does that look like? And can it look futuristic and fun? People painting, people flying airplanes. What if it was all happening in the same experience at the same time? These rough sketches get sort of iterated on. Again, I had maybe 3 days to do this tops, where I was coming up with different ways of making a futuristic city rendered in the background, something in the middle ground that looks like a hub, and then close-up versions of these experiences in the foreground. And so here you can see we've got a little bit of line art being introduced, and I'm showing this stuff to my client every step of the way to make sure that everything stays within scope and feels like it's going to be something the client can sign off on. Line art going even further, and we've got these of course this is loose and gestural. I have to be quick with it after all, but here we can see I'm going through the different steps to sort of separate out these different elements into because of course they're going to want to nudge this plane 10 pixels to the left, or this cloud 3 pixels to the right, so everything is sort of separated and discrete like that. And here we go, we've got this fun sort of compositional black and white, where everything is writ clear, and we can see the concept pretty darn clearly. And a little bit more rendering, shadowing, a little bit of finer details and special effects. We can really see what's going on here. And then just for fun, I added a little bit of color. Of course, it's pretty monochromatic, but I thought it might help. It's like a sunset. Get that sense of horizonness, get the visual translations there, right? So I thought this was pretty good, and I wanted the person who came next in the line, the actual painter concept artist, to have something that would really inspire them to do a good job. Well, of course, they got passed on to somebody else, and I don't know. You tell me. Is this better than the sketch I just did, or is this something that is somehow a bit of a detraction? I don't like how this turned out. Of course, I have no power over it. I don't hire the person who comes next to me, but this was something where when I saw it finally there, I was a little underwhelmed by it, and that just might be my own bias. But I think if we go back, we compare one to the next. Look at the drama. Look at the motion, the intensity, and the fun. And then here, this just feels like sterile. In my opinion, something was lost in the translation from the sketch to the final product. And that's so important, to find what is actually good about the sketch and not lose it by the time it becomes, in my opinion, this is overworked and somehow not that interesting. So that's kind of it.
It
Well, I
looks
think
very flat.
yeah,
Looks
it does
very
look
flat.
flat. It does look
Yeah.
very flat, and something about the depth. And ultimately, I think this is trying to not make zero sacrifices for the sake of like a specific intention. And this looks like a world that could go on forever, right? This looks like there's no limits in sight, and that your imagination is teased to conceive of what could be going on even further beyond the boundaries.
Mhm.
Whereas this just sort of lays it all out. And these buildings in the distance, they don't look big. They look like it looks like a little Toontown facsimile kind of backdrop with forced perspective. Why do that? Why cheap it out at the last second? And your guess is as good as mine. But at some point, this got handed to someone who approved something that maybe they shouldn't have. I don't mind the colorfulness, or whatever. It didn't go the way it should have, and something was lost. Well,
So
it's
I
not.
have, if you don't mind, I have a couple
Yeah, please.
questions.
Yeah, anybody ask questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, please.
So
I'll go back to
there's
my
a
own
lot of
sketch too. But
there's
yeah.
a lot. Yeah, I feel parallels of I'd imagine the process. Someone, you're sitting in a room and they're discussing their vision and in
Hmm.
words, right? And it's your job to translate that graphically
Hmm.
that
Yeah.
represents it. So how do you or do you have a process that filters through what the client or whoever's paying you and what that
Hmm.
means, and how do you translate that into something visual? Like, is there keywords? Is it emotion? How do you do that?
I think in some ways it just comes back to the fundamentals every time. Every time it's the fundamentals. In this case, the no one told me to have this sort of iconic um, composition where we've got like this epic wide and a symmetrical kind of composition.
Hmm.
But I know that kind of composition makes things look amazing and reverential and possibly inspiring, for instance. So, and then it's like, again, what comes next after that? You have to leave room for the typography somewhere. So you have to treat some areas with more negative space than others. I knew that this symbol in the middle was something super important to client, so that had to be in the dead center of the composition, and that all the other things would sort of be tertiary to that. And
Hmm.
so it's just sort of like what is fundamentally most important, and then just working backwards from there. Almost, it's always that way. And I think the hard part is separating from the distraction of what the client is saying versus what the client actually needs, because they'll say things like it needs to. It's all just buzzwords, right?
Yeah,
So
right.
all of that is just a distraction. Ultimately, we're not reinventing the wheel. This is uh, the the big difference in this was these characters couldn't have legs. That was the thing that would have that really made anything this different compared to anything else at all.
Yeah.
And of course, it's like this was just one sketch in like I've been doing this like 20 years, like I said. So this isn't the first time I've done this kind of project, and of course the
Mm.
lessons from that project feed into this one, whether or not anybody knew it at the time.
Yeah.
And so that's why and this was the only sketch I did. I didn't do, compared to the previous case study where I did 3 thumbnails, so they had options. Like, this was it. I just put this out, Meta signed off, and that was it. And it's possibly because they didn't have any time to make any other decisions, and no one wanted responsibility for it anyway. But this was it. So it can be just as simple as that. You just get it one and done. Of course, that's not the typical thing, but in this case, that's what happened. But whether or not it's the best way to do it, I don't know. And I'd actually like to demo what the process might be, which is what we do right now, if that's possible.
Yeah.
Theoretically, we have about 30 minutes to come up with something. And Adrian, I'm not sure if you're monitoring, but I'm voluntelling. You like that word, right? I'm voluntelling him to come up with something that is. Let's call it a prompt. There's no AI here, but let's call it a prompt that will give me something that we can sort of demonstrate how a sketch might come together in real time. And I may embarrass myself, and my program might crash, and it could be a hilarious thing. But we've had a solid 30 minutes no matter what, so I think we could give this a shot. If you can think of something, I'll draw it in a typical 16:9 format, and I bet we can come up with something cool. Cool.
Somebody want to shout something out?
Yeah, do something that possibly involves architecture, so I can like draw a building, give a sense of perspective, but like, make it interesting. Got a very intimidating blank canvas here.
We're a shy group here, unless somebody's going to show
That's
something
all
else.
good. It's all good.
How about a rocket manufacturing facility?
Okay, cool.
Shocker, I know. Think of it like, what is the vision for a starbase?
Okay. Okay.
Now, Max hasn't seen what we do here, guys. So this is be his vision for it.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I think we
I
should
didn't have
also
the
be, we should also
sorry,
throw some words out there too of like,
yeah, throw some
yeah,
things.
there's a
Give it a
vision of
spin.
a star base. What does that mean?
Sure.
Like we're trying to
Mhm.
talk about our technological prowess and forward thinking for the future. I don't know. What are some
Uh-huh.
other
It's
things
launch
our
day.
clients would tell us?
I was going to say forward thinking, but at the end of the day, it's a little bit on the scrappy side.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So it's not necessarily the hyper sterilized, like we can have like bits of rocket crud like off to the side for that was
Yeah.
maybe tossed or demolished, or an
Mhm.
a failed exploded rocket. Well, I'll tell you where I'm starting off and why I'm doing that. A somewhat curved horizon might give a sense that we're on a planet that is not Earth, for instance, if we can see the curvature of the of the thing. So all of a sudden, like with just that slightest bit, we've got a sense of here we've got a sense of a world that is unlike Earth necessarily. Now, I'm gonna what I do in storyboarding is a lot of what I do is I apply my trade in tropes and stereotypes and stuff like that. So, if I'm thinking of something that needs to read instantly as futuristic, otherworldly, making it look like we're on some sort of uh, base that is constructed on a planet that has craters, for instance, could look extremely cool. And when I draw things, I'm drawing it in a way, and this is just my own bias, but for my work, it's got to have broad mass appeal. So I'm not trying to do things in a way like I'm not drawing it like, oh, I don't know how to pronounce their name properly, but H.R. Geiger, the person who designed all that alien stuff in the original movies, that's futuristic and alien, but it's also extremely unsettling and not palatable to, I think, children or your average viewer necessarily. So all of that is great for what it needs to serve. But here you can see that I'm just very loosely indicating like a landscape that feels otherworldly. But the determinations I'm making with why I'm putting one thing next to another and uh, and all that is that's just basically composition. We're going to put something that feels big on the horizon here, and we'll have some atmospheric perspective. And then here, this is of interest, and then little avenues that connect them. So something slightly taller can be here, and this will be like a rocket. Okay. Everybody, no matter what you're doing, save your work. Just do it. All right. Okay. Okay, here we go. So what would be interesting now is to have this sense of connecting all these different things, almost nodes of interest, some sort of thing that feels like it could be, a pipeline that goes from one facility to the next, sort of inferring a sense of connection and separation. And over here, inside this crater, there could be all sorts of stuff. It could be a fun thing that maybe it's got an iris, thing that closes, something could open, come out of it.
So
Synthesizing.
as you're
Sure.
drawing, is that
Yeah.
feeding your creative narrative of building the scene? Right? You're thinking in composition and what could this be? And then you're sort of
Right.
solving that
Yeah.
with how does that relate to the theme of what the
Yeah.
prompt that we
Yeah.
gave you?
Yeah. Of course. And of course, the prompt you gave me is fairly generic. Like it's obviously gives a lot of it had all the sense of like, okay, here's some parameters, but then it in between all of those words, the things that you did not say, I give myself carte blanche to add anything that I feel doesn't violate what you were describing. And of course, what you described was very basic. I mean, it's sort of like a basic description, right? Of like, okay, it's a rocket facility, otherworldly. I mean, do I even recall it correctly? It's like an otherworldly rocket facility. But we can have these kinds of different, like for instance, here, I'm trying to determine which. Yeah, I think I want something to feel like.
Ginger, while Max is doing this, I was just saying to the group here that one of the things I really appreciate about Max's process is he's not hung up on it being right or wrong, other than his sort of 20 years of embodied muscle memory knowledge about composition and foreground, middle ground, background, and whatnot. But really, he's just allowing a bit of, for anybody that was at the previous symposium, he's very much in the open mode here. If you recall the open closed mode of practicing. And he's just freestyling on what if, not is it right or wrong, just what if he tried this, what if he tried that.
Yeah, exactly.
Really
there's nothing that I'm drawing that I can't undo, and then let's just explore, right? Like it's not, this is nothing extreme, and of course it's just a sketch, right? My only worry is that my program might crash, and then I lose a little bit of work. But even that can be a good thing, send you off the wrong path and back onto the right one. There can be like essentially, if these were like a maglev rail system or something like that, so that looked futuristic. So we'll avoid the whole concept of like spinning wheels and just think of it in terms of like some sort of monorail interconnection. This could be like a depot that connects over to this crater. This crater can be deep while this, so like, let's imagine instead that this crater just goes down while this crater here rises up.
Max, I joined late. I was just curious, what are you drawing on? Are you drawing on a iPad?
This is a giant, it's the biggest one I could afford, a giant Wacom tablet. It's a 24-inch Pro. And it's, yeah, they're not cheap, but I think it's the best tool for what I do, certainly. iPads are great for a lot of things. They're not quite perfect for enterprise, where we need to sometimes export or fit better into a pipeline with different kinds of programs that are desktop based. So while I have an iPad, it mostly gathers dust, unfortunately.
Well, how do you switch from sharp lines to just look like brush strokes so quickly?
These are, this is a tool I've developed that it's all the same brush. It's all the same brush. And I can rotate it as well. And so I can make like a thick,
It's like pressure sensitive and
very pressure. It's
yeah.
pressure sensitive as well. And I can even blend with it if I turn on other modes. So it's highly versatile. The time that artists tend to spend switching from brush to brush or trying to find the right size of brush is in storyboarding, that's cost prohibitive. That's just basically bad use of time. So if you can consolidate all the tools into one brush, and it has this texture that is very gritty and sort of forces me to treat the sketch as though the point will not be to overcome imperfections. The imperfections are built into the brushstrokes themselves, and it forces me to just think more conceptually and not as much about like finished renders. Now, of course, here I haven't actually drawn any rockets, but of course we could use our imaginations and see where rockets could be. And so I'll draw something that feels like fins and or boosters coming together. And eventually we'll get where we need. Hi there. I'm not looking
Hi,
at, but
how are
I'm
you?
hearing everybody. Why
It's
don't you,
okay.
ask your
I
questions
have
and
a
say
question for you.
things.
It seems like from what I've seen, and I got here into the call a little late as well, it seems like you create these incredible experiences at a more like city planning, urban planning level and scale. We see architecture, but some of us also do interiors architecture. Have you done work that the experience is a little different, where it is inside out instead of outside in?
I have to, so I'm storyboarding basically in entertainment. I'm like the first hire on a project to sketch things, even when they don't know what they want. So I'm good at drawing all things, like inside and out. Or I'm not great, but I'm good at doing. Now I'm not a designer of interiors, but I would apply all of the same things that I'm talking about. Essentially, just talking about composition. And then when I design interiors, it's often out of how those interiors need to be designed so that the story can flow. So it's not even so much about like what looks cool, it's where does the door have to be in order for the actor to get to the door while still only showing their left side of their face to camera, because the right side of their face is not as attractive as the left side of her face. Stuff like that. That's the sort of stuff I deal with in production.
So
You can
another
see
question, Max,
Yeah, please.
is what I'm seeing visually right now is a very like barren landscape. Is there
Mhm.
like a next level to the story where you start to develop like it's a tropical environment, or it's very rocky and rugged, and that's the next level of detail? Or
Yeah, that could be. Well, we won't get. I've about 15 minutes before the next
Yeah.
presenter. So what we won't see is much of what comes next. But what could come next, for instance, is adding those kinds of details. And what might look good, is, for instance, if I did something that set apart, like obviously this is like almost like a lunar sort of Martian kind of landscape, but it could be something where there were like native plants and things like that. The prompt for this was to create like a lunar, sorry, I should say it's a rocket building facility. That was the prompt, right? So there are all sorts of like different okay, one thing that I was doing, which isn't that great. You can see here where I was starting to put like blast lines around this crater. But that would be a no-no in this situation, because what that would do is put too much focus. Like those lines would become compositional, the work against sort of the composition that I'm trying to actually do, which is sort of the focal point for this is really more here. Sorry to say. So I need to make sure that what I'm drawing is in support of that, and then everything else is sort of secondary. So right here where we've got this lovely little rail, for instance, is pointing directly at where I want the eye to go. And it can look like it's sort of still maybe in the shadow of a crater that I'm just now drawing right here.
And I think that, Max, as you talk about your composition team, as you're thinking about creating the views that explain your design for your client, really, a lot of my comments are what's important in this view and what are we looking at? Because what you're telling me and what I see sometimes don't align. Not you, Max, but the team, right? And so thinking about what's the story I'm trying to tell, and does my graphic support that in that particular view? Micah, you and I have had conversations about how do you pull in tighter to the building, because the overall sense of the design, you get from an elevation, but we really want to talk about the arrival sequence and the experience of the pedestrian, right, at the building entry. So how do you achieve that? And interiors, how do you convey the idea of collaboration and working together in a space, but also talk about the design, right, and that human factor in our views. So interesting little tips.
Yeah,
from you, Max.
if something is pulling your eye away from what's important, you gotta do something about it. You gotta, like, don't have, you gotta show no mercy. Like if it was like fix that first and foremost,
Right.
because it's you could do like, oh, but I drew this really amazing car. Well, if the car is distracting from the building, then make it not distract from the building. Do something to it to knock down its importance. And you can see here, even with like just the shadows that I'm adding, sort of underscoring a little bit what's happening. And of course, there's no detail in this whatsoever. But it possibly, in the amount of time that's left, I can start to add some bits of shading and things that will help separate the spaces. And you'll really get a sense that, like, shit, if I squint at this, sorry, pardon my French, but if I squint at this, like, this is looking really cool all of a sudden. I don't know what it is or what I'm looking at, but it's looking really cool and I want to know more. And it's like, this guy knows what he's doing. He knows how to control minds so that they like what they're looking at, even if they don't even know what they're looking at. Just a sense of like confidence in what you're doing. Well, it's not, and again, this is just fundamentals, so it's nothing that is this stuff is like hardwired into I'll get the organ of the brain wrong. I don't know what, the hippocampus, whatever it is, the part that connects to our lizard brain, like that deep part of our brain that signals all the fight and flight stuff. Like that's that instant read. Those are the parts of our brain that bypass the whole logic and reasoning. It's like it goes into emotion, less about knowledge, like I know that I love this. It's more like I feel that I love this. Like love at first sight, right? How do you know? You don't know when you meet your true love, right? It's something you feel. You see it from a distance, right? That's all like a very romantic way of putting things, but just using that terminology, that's
connection.
That's like the theme. Yeah, make an emotional connection that people just feel it, like stir something in their, I don't know, like make it kind of sexy, you can tell I work in advertising, but you basically need to get people to turn their brains off a little bit, because people can be defensive about stuff that they don't understand. Bypass all that, make it feel like they've always known that they would love this thing and they didn't even know it.
Do you present your work, Max, or do you just let the graphic speak for itself? What's that process look like?
I'm very insulated from end client, so I do not get to present my work the way it should be. Often I have to rely on people who are far less adept at speaking in public, unfortunately, than I am, and that's to the detriment of the project often. But that is the reality. I'm a vendor. I'm a contractor. I do not get to be the star of the show. I cede all of the amazing credit or whatever to people who often have literally nothing to do with what I just draw. So that's an unfortunate reality, but it is not an uncommon one either. And I'm paid decently well, so I don't really fret about that stuff. And again, if I don't work well with if a company is treating me poorly, I just simply don't work with them. And luckily, it doesn't really happen. And anyway, it's too egotistical to feel like you shouldn't share any credit with anybody. I'm, as you can see, what I can come up with in a minute doesn't necessarily deserve, any sort of special deference. Like, again, this is just a few minutes work. I'm only doing what makes sense. So not for that. Like this may be in the end a winning idea that gets jobs awarded, but there's a lot that happens in a production where things need to go.
Max.
Oh yeah, please, yeah.
Max.
You mentioned earlier on one of your case studies about having the playing the mediator between two different clients or customers.
Yeah, that was a hard one. Yeah.
Level of differentiating of opinions. How could you speak to maybe a little bit about how you navigated that and what cues or how you prioritized the cues that you took from one versus the other, even if they were contrary to the opposite?
Yeah, I think in all jobs there are contradicting realities that need to be synthesized in order. So it wasn't so much like that was like the fact that like there were disparate motivations for different entities at play here. Like everybody wants to get the credit, nobody wants to take any blame. There's lots of stress involved, and often people don't feel secure enough in their jobs to know what to do next, or like put themselves out there for risk, even though that's part of what needs to happen. But in that case, because, well, I knew it was going to be useless unless I got them to sit down at the same time with me and have the discussion. Now, luckily, I knew the questions that needed to be asked in order to. What I did was I essentially distilled down the story into like almost Lego pieces of drawings that said, okay, we know that we need to have like a wide shot, right? And I got them both to say yes. So I was like, okay, this drawing that's a thumbnail on a sticky note represents that. Okay, that is done. Now we know we need to see a close up of our hero's face, right? And they're like, well, yeah. And so from this sort of like reductive kind of approach, I was able to get them to see that what they thought were worlds of difference in their opinions about things was just extremely arbitrary. And soon enough, they both got bored of listening to themselves yammer on about how little they had actually formed an opinion. They just had an opinion about their opinion, and simply knew that they didn't want the other guy to be in charge. But after I showed them like, hey, well, if you guys want to work and help me solve this, they're like, oh, work? Oh, yeah, you guys can handle that. I'll be over here playing video games or whatever. And eventually they did leave me alone to just make the piece. That project was a disaster, but it had nothing to do with me. It was they really cheaped out on the vendor to create the darn thing, and so the finished animation looked very poor in my opinion. But that's how it goes sometimes. So you can see, and I don't know if it's coming across. I'm not even thinking about what I'm doing right now. I'm actually just thinking more about like how I'm responding to your questions. The way I'm putting this together, it's like automatic muscle memory. I'm not thinking about how it is that like oh, there should be this here or there should be that there. It's almost like what is there tells me what needs to come next. And of course, we're going to do some really quick things right now that will hopefully be really impressive. I think I've saved. Okay, so we're going to save. So this already looks pretty good. We'll just mess around with some of these layering effects to see how we can possibly increase some of the drama. And I'm just introducing like multiply and overlay layers to take what were very loose kinds of suggestions about ideas. I was really just sort of drawing energy and composition. And now I can, and because it was just loose, they were sort of unintimidatingly easy to draw. But now I can do things like add. I can just say, see all those rough drawings that I didn't really try to commit to at the time. Well, now I'm committing to them after the fact, and I can increase what their presence essentially. So now what we can do is we can do something that sort of, and before you know it, it can look like concept art for like the next Total Recall movie or something. And again, adding even more drama, we can paint in light that feels like it is, what if we had some sort of cool sunset effect, weird atmospheric sundog or whatever it is, shiny glints of metal.
Hey, Max.
Mm-hmm.
At what point, or does color theory ever play a role as you're starting a project? Or like, do you?
I appreciate that question. Almost none, because storyboards are very like color agnostic generally. We try to think about form and not even so much tone. Like often we think about it like almost sculpturally, as if like these were those are really jobs that come down the line a bit. They're not for us in the pipeline as storyboard artists, but there's definitely in it the interest in color, but not enough practice to say I'm an expert at any kind of color stuff.
Gotcha. Thank you.
So here where we've got the highest amount of contrast with like light and dark bits, I'm introducing things that feel like details that are really most catching the eye. And so I can force you to sort of look here first, and then everywhere else second, and then everywhere else third and fourth and fifth. And so the last thing you'll notice is the last thing I need you to notice. as opposed to anything else. And in fact, it almost needs no other details. If we shrink this down to like the size of a postage stamp, you can get a cool sense. Now, of course, like I only see nothing but problems in this, and I'm not sure if it's even impressive for you guys. But the, I want this to be. It doesn't have to be anything more than it is, which is just an initial sketch, and all this needs to do is be something that like a director can look at. Well, of course, here you can see I've goofed up pretty considerably because I've got the sun where it shouldn't be. So here we have to undo this a little bit. The sun is actually coming from over here. I'm going to quickly try to implement this because the way the shadows were lying, we need to have something that feels more like that. But what we can still do is have some reflections coming off of the rocket. And you can see that like I can make a mistake, but I'll catch it. It's like, okay, I didn't go too far with that before I was like, wait a second, something is not quite lining up. And it's because I really try to listen to that lizard brain part of my emotions that says, hey, something's off. Just so you know, even if this looks good, something's off. You're going to have to fix it eventually. And so here, like, we'll get this metallic shine off of some of these elements. But here in the foreground, we're not going to really catch as much of that.
Amazing.
So I don't know. What do you guys think? Is this cool? Is this lame? I could be. There's one more thing, of course, I got to do. This is a rocket testing facility, right? So we have to have something that feels like in the background there's like a rocket going.
Just impressive that you did this within a very short amount of time.
Thank you. I do this for a living many times a day, but they're not all cool projects like this. Like next week, I'm on a. It's basically it's Christmas season in Storyboard. Like all the Christmas commercials have to be ready in the summer, so that when Christmas actually comes along, that they're actually ready. So starting Monday, I'm on a job for Aldi that involves that fun little carrot mascot that they have. If you're familiar, at least with the British chain supermarket.
So, Max, another question from here is your next step on this. Like let's say you called this storyboard image 1, and you go to storyboard image number 2. Do you zone into a specific thing like the rocket? Or what do you see to visualize your next step?
That's a great question. What I might, so this is like what we call an establishing shot. It just sets the context for the setting so that the viewer knows this is the future. We're in a place that has monorails, rockets, barren landscapes, and all the scientific tropes, right? So now what I would do next, for instance, if I was making a story, it would show this item in the foreground. I'm going to zoom in a bit so you guys can really see. This delivery that's coming on the rocket. So what this is about essentially. We've got if there is a story here, we've got this payload coming into this facility, which is part of a broader node of facilities, right? And so what I would do is, basically show. You could theoretically infer that from this scene we could have this almost. Do you remember in the first Star Wars episode 4 of the first Star Wars, where they pretend that they are they're infiltrating like one of the enemy bases by pretending, so above this, on this payload, let's say this is like a galactic empire of evil, and we've got rebels that are on this payload. So they're going in there, and this just basically shows their approach. And then the next shot would be like them docking. And then we could show like sweat rolling down the eyebrow of the person who is saying, yeah, I got another load for you. Sorry, it's early, got vacation coming up, so just thought I'd knock it out. It's again, when I'm talking these ideas, like come across like, oh, that's a really good idea, but these are just tropes. These are just the Legos of storytelling, of ideas. All of this is just stuff that's been done a trillion times before. You just dump out the Legos and then rearrange them into something that feels fresh. But it's all just taken from our vast collective experience on things. I think if now there could be ways of increasing some of this. I'll save it one more time. I know we're past time. I'm just going to try and do something real quick. We'll see if I can even enhance it further.
Max, while you're doing that, question: the more specific direction that you are provided, does that help or hurt your process?
I only want to work with customers, clients, and people who are interested in clarity of ideas and wanting to use the power of storyboarding to solve their problems. So if a client has no ideas and wants to cede all of that power to me, I love it. If a client has, I know exactly what I want, and I want you to execute this to a T, and I don't want your input on anything else, I still love it. Because that's actually, like, you can see that rendering, like drawing, is no challenge to me. This is fun. And so that just takes some more work off my plate. It's the concept. So you could see right there, I just did a little dodge and burn to really sort of underscore things a bit. Now, of course, that's over. Now it's over vignetted and stuff like that. So I, of course, went too far. But it's an interesting kind of ability to control so much in the composition with all these digital techniques. I'll see if I can just split the difference a little bit. I mean, this is pretty cool. But yeah, I don't. Did I answer that question well? I don't mind when people say, here's, Ridley Scott does thumbnails of all of his stuff, and if he just said, hey, turn this into brilliant artwork because these are the sketches, but this is what I want, that's a dream job. If he said, I don't have any time to think of the script, will you just give me your ideas, then that's a dream job too. What isn't good is when a client doesn't know what they want and doesn't want to share creative control. Or any of, I've had directors like that, unfortunately. They tend to be
we've had clients like that too.
Yeah, no, it's that's hard. That's hard, where they sort of don't like your ideas, so they tell you what they want, so you implement them and they're like, no, I don't like it. We're like, okay, but that was your idea, right? What about your idea did you not like? And if you didn't like it, why did you ask us to do it? That hate to say it, but it's that's a universal problem. But hopefully this is sort of demonstrating what I can do and what people in my profession do. Now, of course, most people who do it are not as good as me, but I in a perfect world, we would all have these sort of skills, like fundamentally more or less at our disposal. Just like there are temperamental clients, there are temperamental storyboard artists who don't like making changes and don't like fundamentals. They would prefer, if they could, simply to download whatever they could off of Google Image and then just trace it. And unfortunately,
how's AI going to impact your business?
So AI does very poor continuity tracking in storytelling. And as far as that is concerned, it is not much of a threat because, for instance, from one image to a next, it doesn't remember to have the person carrying the prop that they need to in order to convey the story, the sense of like a story that makes sense from one image to the next. But that could be, changed over time. I'm intimidated by I will concede that I'm impressed with what AI can do, but I also see what it doesn't do. And a lot of the parts of storytelling that directors hire us for are difficult. And yes, they could use AI to make images, but that would still require them to do like eat the spinach of making hard decisions and suffering the consequences. And luckily, no one is quite excited about doing that yet. So we'll see. Time will tell. But AI is like a slot machine, right? I'm not saying that what I did here was like perfectly inspired, and I'm not just sort of drawing some of these things at random. A lot of this is just instinctual, but I can make changes exactly where you want them and not exactly where you don't want them. And at the end of the day, I can sell this. It's copyrightable. I made it from scratch. There's no jurisdictional issues as far as like legalities, and I certainly didn't plagiarize it. There's no references in front of me. This is completely from my imagination and the experience, and you all saw it live, so that's it. So I'll zoom in one more time to sort of get a sense of image at large, and I hope, I think it looks good, and I hope it sort of demonstrated well the techniques. But I know I'm over time, and I apologize for that, and I really want to just sort of say thank you for your attention. And if there's quick questions, maybe you could even just email me. Adrian can disseminate that if you want to have follow-up questions. That may be the better way to handle it. But I really appreciate everybody's attention.
Max, thank you so much for your time. I hope everybody enjoyed it.
Thank you, Max.
Thank you.
All right. Oh yeah,
Thank you
very much. Yeah, I painted these.
Thank
All
you,
right,
Max.
all right, everybody. Hey, send me a link. I want to listen to everybody else's stuff too. But all right, if not, I'll just bid you adieu. And again, this has been a blast. I'm going to sign off now.
Thank you, Max.
Thank you.
Thank
All right,
you.
bye-bye.
Thank you.
Okay, West Coasters, we'll see you in about 19 minutes. East Coasters, thanks for your time, guys. Hope you enjoyed the symposium.
Thanks. Back to work.
All right.
Thank you.
Interiors, we'll see you in 5 minutes.
Hopefully get a screenshot. Send a screenshot of that.
Oh, shit. So I'll ask him to send
Yeah.
it.
Photo of it.
Send it.
recorded.
Okay, well.
It's recorded, so you can go back and.
That too.
I found it really fun to be watch the big screen and then look over at your screen because it was a smaller version of what was up there.
Yeah, it looks like it's
The
higher
one on your screen
resolution. 'cause
looks
it's